Days after a high-stakes summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam ended without a deal, the U.S. and South Korea offer an olive branch to the regime. Hello, everyone. Welcome to America's News Headquarters. I'm Arthel Neville.
And hello, Arthel. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Eric Shawn. The U.S. announcing that those annual large-scale joint military drills with South Korea will instead be replaced by smaller training exercises. It is all an effort, we are told, to try and ease tensions and support more diplomacy with the North. This, of course, comes as President Trump is defending his decision to walk away from last week's summit with the North Korean dictator.
Every once in a while, you have to walk, because the deal wasn't a deal that was acceptable to me. A lot of what I do with respect to North Korea and any success that we hopefully have, and we've had a lot, we're given no credit. They don't remember that in the last days of the Obama administration, rockets were flying all over the place. Nuclear testing was going on.
Ellison Barber is following the story. She's live in the North Lawn of the White House. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Eric. Yeah, President Trump left Hanoi without any sort of signed agreement. North Korea is not denuclearizing, but despite that, the White House maintains that they do not see the summit as a failure. President Trump says that the talks in Hanoi were productive, and he's expressed optimism that something will happen down the road. But he's also said that there is no rush to make a deal. When asked if there is any chance the U.S. would accept North Korea as a nuclear power and allow them to keep some of their nuclear program and their infrastructure, National Security Advisor John Bolton told Fox News Sunday he does not see how that is possible.
Despite what you said, despite what the president said, aren't you accepting North Korea as a nuclear power? And haven't you, in fact, given a big concession, which is that in return for no testing, you've agreed to cancel major joint exercises with the South Koreans?
No, I don't think the president sees it that way at all. The fact is, at the moment, the leverage is on the side of the United States as the economic sanctions continue to take hold. There's no doubt over a protracted period of time that the time does work in favor of the proliferator, but I think our judgment right now is that time works in the favor of the president's position as North Korea sees the effect of these sanctions taking greater effect.
And Bolton said that the objective of the administration is still that North Korea denuclearize. For now, they say that there is not a fixed date for a third summit, but Bolton also told Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday there that that is a door that the president is prepared to keep open and is holding open. Eric.
And Allison, meanwhile, those are joint military drills with the South and Japan. They've been held routinely. What can you tell us about the fact that they've decided now at least to end them for the moment?
Yeah, the Pentagon is saying that this was a decision made between South Korea and the United States, and that the U.S. Acting Secretary of Defense and South Korea's Minister of Defense spoke on the phone yesterday. According to the Pentagon, the Secretary and Minister reviewed and approved the alliance decisions recommended by the commander of U.S. Forces Korea and the Republic of Korea Joint Chiefs of Staff on the combined exercises and training program. Following close coordination, both sides decided to conclude the Key Resolve and Foil Eagle series of exercises. Pentagon officials are telling Fox News that smaller, less visible exercises with the South Koreans will continue. President Trump has expressed frustration over these drills in the past, saying that they cost far too much money and that in his view, South Korea doesn't carry enough of the financial burden. Eric?
All right, Allison, thanks so much. Arthel.
Eric, thank you. For more on this, let's bring in Olivia Eno. She's a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation's Asian Studies Center and Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy. Olivia, thank you very much. I believe it's, 2:05 in the morning there in Tokyo?
It is very early in the morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm glad to have you. Oyasumi Nasai. Okay, so you as officials signaled that this would happen for the sake of continuing this diplomatic dance with dictator Kim Jong-un. The U.S. and South Korea, as Ellison just reported, canceling their massive springtime military drills. So, Olivia, how costly is this concession?
This is a pretty major concession, and frankly, the relinquishing of continuation of the military exercises is sort of the gift that keeps on giving for North Korea. Of course, the president in Singapore said that they were going to discontinue exercises. Now we're taking it a step further. It looks like some of these exercises are actually being retired, and this affects the long-term capabilities for the U.S. forces who are serving in Korea to be prepared and to have situational awareness for potential conflict on the Korean Peninsula. So I think this is pretty concerning, especially considering that we made no progress at the Hanoi summit just this past week.
But now when you consider the smaller scale modified drills that will continue, can you tell us how effective those drills are? Do you have any information on that?
Sure. So the smaller scale drills are certainly effective, but they're not going to necessarily be, replicating the larger scale military related elements that you would be replicating in those larger military exercises. And so I think this is really concerning, because if you were to have large scale conflict on the Korean Peninsula, you wouldn't have the U.S. and South Korea really being prepared in a way that we have always said is meant to be a proactive measure. President Trump used the word war games when he described them and discontinued them at Singapore, but we have always viewed these as preparedness efforts. And since the president has placed such a strong emphasis on building up our military capabilities and has said that he wants to spend more money on shoring up our defense, this seems like a really backwards move in that regard.
Meanwhile, the second summit with Kim Jong-un, President Trump walked away from the table without chips to cash in. Was this the right gamble, and what is President Trump's next play?
I think we came to the negotiating table in Hanoi too soon. It is clear now that the deal that they discussed in Hanoi was not pre-negotiated, and we didn't get what we thought we would get out of it. I think, we are frankly no closer to a denuclearized North Korea today than we were when we left the Singapore summit, or even prior to the Singapore summit. And I think what makes this even worse is not only have we not made progress on denuclearization, but the president once again shied away from raising these important human rights issues that represent a broader corpus of our comprehensive policy toward North Korea.
So does Kim Jong-un have a convincing reason to completely denuclearize?
I think that if Kim Jong-un wants to be viewed as a respected and legitimate leader in the international community, he has to denuclearize, because what he's communicated in continuing his nuclear program and his missile program is that he's willing to flout international law and obligations that North Korea, Pyongyang's leadership, has actually already acceded to through the Non-Proliferation Treaty and otherwise. And so they're demonstrating that they're not a respectable actor, that they don't keep their word. And so I think that Kim Jong-un, who is looking at the long-term game, he's 30 years old, he wants to be in power over the long term. If he doesn't want to receive pushback from others in the international community, he should seriously consider not only denuclearizing, but shoring up his horrific human rights track record, which also calls his legitimacy into question.
Absolutely. And I've got about 30 more seconds for you, just if you could sum it up for me. You're there in Japan. How has Prime Minister Shinzo Abe reacted to this second summit and now the cancellation of more military exercises? Also, how is this new development assessed by China, Russia, and South Korea?
I think that our allies, especially Japan and South Korea, are fairly concerned that the Hanoi summit didn't result in any specific deliverables. And I think that that's why the Trump administration needs to say, okay, Hanoi didn't go so well. Time to go back to a maximum pressure strategy, one that pushes North Korea. We know now that they care about getting sanctions relief, yet another motivation for them to come to the negotiating table. We need to press them and truly make this maximum pressure by targeting Chinese banks and by raising those thorny human rights issues that the administration has in recent months been reluctant to raise.
Interesting. Well, I started out by saying good night, so now I'll say good morning, since, I don't know, you're probably upside down. So Ohio gozaimasu. Olivia Enos, thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you very much. And be sure to watch The Next Revolution tonight. Steve Hilton will sit down with President Trump's daughter and senior advisor, Ivanka Trump. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fox News Channel.
And meanwhile, back here at home on Capitol Hill, they are bracing for a potential fight over whether Robert Mueller's final report will be made public when it is finished. Meanwhile, House Democrats ramping up their investigation into President Trump's finances and apparently the books at the Trump Organization. That following Michael Cohen's testimony on the hush money payments made to women during the 2016 campaign and the financial practices at his former employer. One of the lawmakers who questioned Cohen the other day, New York Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney of Manhattan. Her district does include Trump Tower. Well, she talked about those investigations when she appeared this morning on Sunday Morning Futures.
This really was the first hearing, oversight hearing that the Democrats had on the White House and holding them accountable for alleged crimes. There is a lot of investigations, including the important Mueller one, where the facts have to be looked at and studied to see if there was any obstruction of justice.
And Michael Cohen will be back on Capitol Hill this week. Garrett Tenney has more from Washington. Hi, Garrett.
Eric, good morning to you. Democrats are now trying to lay the groundwork for any potential impeachment hearings against President Trump. Tomorrow, the House Judiciary Committee will be issuing document requests to more than 60 people from the White House, the Justice Department, the Trump Organization, as well as the Trump family as part of its investigations into the president. On ABC's This Week, committee chairman Jerry Nadler listed off several areas Democrats plan to look into.
The White House seems to have used its power for personal enrichment, in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. We've seen abuses of power and obstruction of justice, threats to the Mueller investigation, threats to witnesses. All of these have to be, and abuses of, all of these have to be investigated and laid out to the American people.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy shot back at Nadler and said Democrats are trying to build a case for a problem that doesn't exist simply because they want to take down President Trump.
I think Congressman Nadler decided to impeach the president the day the president won the election. There's no collusion, so they want to build something else. They want to persuade to go some other place.
This morning, President Trump weighed in on the special counsel's investigation, tweeting in part, "I am an innocent man being persecuted by some very bad, conflicted, and corrupt people in a witch hunt that is illegal and should never have been allowed to start, and only because I won the election." Now, in terms of timing, it is not clear exactly when the Mueller report will be submitted to the Attorney General, but DOJ sources have been telling us that the special counsel's investigation is wrapping up, so you can see both sides are preparing for that report and ultimately what comes next. Eric?
Yeah, a lot of bets it'll come sometime later this month, but we'll see. We've been hearing that. Garrett, thank you. All right, thank you.
Fox News Alert: tragedy in New Orleans as people getting ready for Mardi Gras festivities there. 2 people were killed and several others injured when a car plowed into cyclists and pedestrians on a busy stretch of Esplanade Avenue last night. Police say they have a suspect in custody. Jackie Heinrich is following this story. Jackie, what more can you tell us?
Hi, Arthel. Well, police say that suspect was likely impaired. The majority of the 9 people he hit were on bicycles. This is a look at the suspect, 32-year-old Tashanti Tony. He's the son of a New Orleans police officer. The crash happened on his birthday. Now he's in police custody, facing several charges, including 2 counts of vehicular homicide. The crash happened around 8 o'clock last night along a stretch of Esplanade Ave, spanning 3 blocks near the French Quarter, right near one of the city's largest Mardi Gras parades. Witnesses say they saw that driver swerve into the bike lane, hitting several people and parked cars. He then got out of the car and tried to run without his shoes on. Witnesses held him at the scene.
We were able to apprehend the subject so quickly because, again, the citizens stopped this individual because they thought they was helping someone who had just been involved in a 1-car accident.
A man and a woman, both around 30 years old, died on the street. 5 people were taken to the hospital, 3 of them in critical condition. Another person who initially refused treatment later also went to the hospital. There were multiple mangled bikes at the scene, car parts everywhere, and skid marks all over the median where witnesses say the driver spun out.
I don't know if he has weapons. I don't know if he's drunk. I don't know if he's injured. And, you know, like an injured bird or an injured animal is more dangerous than just a regular animal.
The crash happened about 2 years after a drunk driver rammed into a crowd at a New Orleans Mardi Gras parade, hurting 28 people. While police say they don't have a motive in this crash, they're looking into where the driver was coming from and where he was going. 1.4 million people are expected to attend Mardi Gras this year. That's about 3.5 times the population of New Orleans. Police have not released any information on who the victims are. Arthel.
Jackie Heinrich. Thank you, Jackie. Eric?
Arthel, in Sacramento, California, prosecutors saying there will be no charges filed against those officers involved in the deadly shooting of an unarmed black man there last year. 22-year-old Stephon Clark was killed by 2 officers after he ran from them into his grandparents' backyard. The officers apparently saying they thought he had a gun turned out it to be a cell phone. The district attorney says the officers did not break any law.
These 2 officers who shot and killed Stephon Clark nearly a year ago here in Sacramento. The case sparked weeks of protests right after it happened. Clark was a 22-year-old man who was a father of 2. He also had a history of beating the mother of his 2 children. In fact, she had accused him of assault 2 days before the shooting. The DA said video and audio from the body cams worn by both officers show the cops truly believed Clark was carrying a gun. It turned out to be just a cell phone.
The body-worn camera shows that flash of light, consistent with what the officers said. Mercadal said they thought it was a muzzle flash. Robinette said he believed it was light reflecting off a gun.
Schubert also pointed to video from the sheriff's helicopter, which shows Clark was coming toward the officers even as they were yelling at him to stop and show his hands. Toxicology results showed he had alcohol, Xanax, and several other drugs in his system. Schubert drew some heat for talking about what was found on Clark's cell phone. There were dozens of calls to his girlfriend, a search on ways to easily kill yourself, and a text message to his girlfriend showing him holding 10 Xanax pills and threatening to kill himself.
It's quite clear that Mr. Clark was in a state of despair and he was impaired. And it's very sad because no human being should be in that position. But the truth is that a jury would be entitled to that information.
The whole thing started with a report of someone breaking car windows in the neighborhood. The DA said Stephon Clark was that person. Sacramento's mayor said the outcome should have been different.
Did the officers who shot Stephon Clark commit a crime? Her answer was no. Our community and its leadership have different questions. Was the outcome wrong? Was the outcome unacceptable? The answer to both questions is yes.
Clark's family has filed a $20 million federal lawsuit. The city and the state's AG are both looking into the cops' actions. Eric?
All right, Dan, thanks so much. Arthel?
Well, Eric, as we prepare to mark 5 years since the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, how the victims' families are making a renewed push for answers. Plus, will the Senate join the House in rebuking President Trump's national emergency declaration on the southern border? How the looming vote could divide Republicans.
You know I'm building the wall. We're finishing the wall. We got a lot of money. And there'll be some people in the room that don't like this.
President Trump at CPAC vowing to build the wall on the southern border. This as the Senate prepares to veto on a House-passed resolution blocking the president's national emergency declaration to fund the project. Florida Senator Rick Scott addressed the upcoming vote this morning in an interview on Sunday Morning Futures.
Well, I'm going to vote for border security. I'm going to vote with the president. I know a lot of people don't like the process. None of us like this process. It's all caused because the Democrats don't believe in border security. I want results. I know the president wants results.
Joining me now, David Jackson, White House reporter for USA Today. Okay, David, so as this is a numbers game, will enough Republican senators support the president's national emergency declaration? And if there is not enough support, will President Trump follow through with his threat to veto Congress's decision?
Well, the White House doesn't think there are enough votes. They're fairly confident that when push comes to shove, the Senate will not vote to basically override his emergency declaration. But up on Capitol Hill, you have a lot of Republicans who are signaling that they do think they have the votes. There was Senator Lamar Alexander gave a speech a couple days ago while the president was in Vietnam, and a lot of people seem to think that if push came to shove, the Republicans would vote. And if they do that, rest assured the president will veto it. There's no question about that.
And I want to show some of the senators, GOP senators right now on screen, who said they have said they will vote against the emergency declaration. We have Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Tom Tillis of North Carolina. So, David, would a lack of total support for the president's national emergency among Republican lawmakers represent a bigger picture fracture inside the GOP, or is the national emergency declaration just a one-off?
No, I think it's kind of a symbol. I think there's been tensions rising between congressional Republicans and President Trump for some time now, and I think they're coming to the fore because of this emergency declaration. I mean, you notice the president's comments about Kim Jong-un and Otto Warmbier in Vietnam, that drew a lot of pushback from congressional Republicans back here. There were a lot of tensions during the government shutdown. I think you're seeing more and more Republicans come out and criticizing President Trump because they see the poll numbers, they're worried about their own jobs, and I think we've seen some of that, and I think we'll see more of it.
And if the president's border wall gets entangled in court, for the president, you know, he can campaign on that. He's fighting for his
Right.
base, which will be applauded, thus rewarded with votes from his base. But however, is there any risk in this as President Trump, you know, he efforts to garner votes beyond his 37% base?
Well, that's the problem. For one thing, you talked about whether there's going to be enough Senate votes. The White House is talking to Republicans to try to head off this vote, and one of the things they're saying is, hey, go ahead and let the courts decide whether the president acted legally or not. But in terms of expanding base, I don't think he does. I think it's the wall argument and the national emergency. I think those are great for his base. I think he's got solid support there. But in terms of going beyond it, I really don't see it. I don't see a lot of excitement, certainly among Democrats, and I don't see much excitement among independents about this wall plan either.
And speaking to Democrats, apart from pushing back saying, yes, we do care about, they would say they do care about, you know, border security, they're going to attempt to use this for their political favor. Is there anything for them to successfully, David, chew on? Or if Democrats push too much and put too much stock into this, might this burn them in the end?
It definitely could. Now, the Democrats, they don't say it's a wall argument. They say it's more of a presidential power argument. They're basically saying Trump is grabbing power and spending money he doesn't have authority to build this wall. And that's what they're going to cast it as. The presidency is becoming too powerful. Trump's exceeding his authority. And I think that's going to be a very appealing argument, frankly, in the elections. But you're right, they can't overdo it because when push comes to shove, we're actually talking about a wall, and we're talking about, what, $5 billion? That's just a pittance when it comes to the overall federal budget. So I think at some point voters will decide that this is way too much argument over this particular issue.
David Jackson, White House reporter for USA Today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're now coming up on 5 years since the mysterious disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. You may remember that went down somewhere in the Indian Ocean with 239 people on board. Families of the victims are demanding a new search as they prepare to mark this somber occasion later this week. Jillian Turner live in Washington with the very latest on this. I can't believe it's been 5 years. Hi, Jillian.
I know, it's passed in a heartbeat, Eric. So the families of the 239 people who perished on board Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 gathered together in Kuala Lumpur today to mark that 5th anniversary of the jets and their loved ones' disappearance.
We will never, never, ever, ever forget all those on board, no matter what. Be it 10 years from now, 15 years from now, they will still be in our hearts, in our prayers, and constantly in our minds, because we will recall everything that we have done for them.
Malaysia, China, and Australia carried out a years-long search for answers and evidence in the southern Indian Ocean that wrapped up in January 2017. Then an American firm named Ocean Infinity carried out a follow-on search that wrapped in May of last year, neither one finding any definitive answers. Now, this morning, Malaysia's transportation minister says his government's open to new proposals to resume the search for the star-crossed flight.
If there are any credible leads and any specific proposals, especially from Ocean Infinity, we are more than willing to look at it, and we are prepared to discuss with them the new proposal. Of course, the approach of using no fee, no cure, if there's no fee, no result, then we can prepare to look at it.
Ocean Infinity's CEO says the firm's up for the challenge, saying they've developed new technology over the past year that could help.
Our expectation is for the government to say, yes, let's start searching again. That's what we want to happen. Because without doing that, you won't find a plane. You can't be sitting down and waiting for something to fall on your lap.
More than 30 pieces of debris believed to be part of the MH370 plane have washed up along the Indian Ocean coastline. The families put 2 of those items on display today in the hopes seeing the debris will help the public understand the depth of their loss. Eric?
All right, Jillian, thank you. Arthel?
Well, we have a Fox News alert for you because tensions are escalating between the U.S. and Venezuela's disputed president.
I think we've warned Maduro and his henchmen and the Cubans very clearly, but the opposition is united in ways unprecedented over the last 20 years.
How Russia is working to fend off a potential military intervention in Venezuela as the regime's opposition leader, Juan Guaido, ramps up pressure on Nicolas Maduro to resign. Plus, a key part of the civil rights movement being recognized today, how thousands of people, including several Democratic White House hopefuls, are commemorating the historic March on Selma. One of the most iconic moments in the fight for civil rights in America is being remembered today with the annual Edmund Pettus Bridge crossing in Alabama. It commemorates what's known as Bloody Sunday, which later prompted protests led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and eventually resulted in the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Several Democratic presidential candidates, both past and present, taking part in today's events, including this one at the Brown Chapel AME Church. Jonathan Seri is in Selma with more. Jonathan?
Hi, Arthel. Today, Hillary Clinton was honored at the King Unity Breakfast here in Selma. During her keynote speech, the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee said voter suppression still takes place even today. Take a listen.
And the clearest example is from next door in Georgia. Stacey Abrams should be governor, leading that state right now.
Fighting voter suppression was a common theme among other politicians at the event, including Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who announced his second bid for president in early February, and Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, who told reporters he'll make his decision on whether to run in the next month or so as he considers his campaign's impact on his family. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, who announced his candidacy last month, is also in town speaking.
We are at a point in our country where we see a moral vandalism that is attacking our ideals and beliefs and eroding the dream of our nation.
I want to see automatic voter registration in every state in this country. If you are 18 years of age and an American citizen, you have the right to vote, and no state official, no local official will stop you.
We know that they will stop at nothing to suppress the vote. Why? Because they are afraid of what we will do with the vote.
And you can see and hear heavy rains coming down over the town of Selma. Even so, they are gearing up for potentially thousands of people participating in this reenactment of the Bloody Sunday March some 54 years ago. Potentially thousands of people marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge behind me. That is scheduled to take place around 2:30 Central Time this afternoon. Arthel?
All right, Jonathan Seri, thank you very much for that report there. Eric?
We have an alert on the developing political and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Opposition leader Juan Guaido traveling throughout South America, looking to increase pressure on disputed President Nicolas Maduro to step down. He may return home tomorrow and could possibly face arrest by Maduro's forces if he does. This comes as Russia announced it is ready to take part in bilateral talks with Washington, as National Security Advisor John Bolton is warning of the potential for a possible U.S. military intervention in Venezuela in an attempt to restore democracy.
In this administration, we're not afraid to use the phrase Monroe Doctrine. This is a country in our hemisphere. It's been the objective of American presidents going back to Ronald Reagan to have a completely democratic hemisphere.
Joining us now is Isaias Medina. He's a former Venezuelan senior diplomat to the United Nations here in New York, and Mr. Medina quit the Maduro government a year and a half ago in protest. Mr. Medina, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. I appreciate it so much.
Of course, sir. What do you think the Trump administration has planned?
Well, first of all, allow me to thank President Trump. We believe he is doing his best effort. He has brought a lot of the humanitarian assistance. Also, he's brought hope to the Venezuelan civilian population. And we believe in his best intentions. And of course, we know that he is a great negotiator and he is not afraid to walk out if it's a bad deal. But let me just share with you that Venezuela is the Syria of the Western Hemisphere. We have the same actors. We have Russia, Iran, and Turkey. But if you add to this mix China plus FARC, ELN, Hezbollah, and 60 non-state actor groups armed that are acting against the civilian population, we are in the evidence of a proxy puppet Game of Thrones. For example, you see these militia groups are proxy puppets of Maduro. Maduro is a proxy puppet of Cuba, and Cuba is a proxy puppet of Russia. And so we have all these anti-Western, anti-democratic, and anti-American rogue states that are challenging the Brazilian, Colombian, and the U.S. sovereignty by applying asymmetrical warfares on what Joseph Humira at CPAC this weekend called the border walls. And so you see with the forced displacement of 3.5 million Venezuelans to these borders, they are certainly challenging the sovereignty of these countries. And as the German permanent representative at the Security Council twice in the last 3 weeks has said, Venezuela has become a clear threat to the maintenance of peace and security in the region.
So if it is a clear threat to security and peace in the region, what can the Trump administration do? We hear they're going to be announcing new sanctions against Cuba because of Havana's propping up of Maduro. That's on top of Venezuelan sanctions and the revoking of the visas of officials that they did on Friday. What you were describing then is really basically the West, American values, democracy against the evils of the world right here in our hemisphere.
Without a doubt. We in Venezuela are the first line of defense of the American gateway. So if you allow me, please, and I know the U.S. is doing a great effort with the sanctions, with the negotiations and so on, but we as Venezuelans, and I must say, I am a proud member of Rumbo Libertad, that is the top civil resistance movement, conservative movement inside and outside Venezuela. And we believe in our right, our God-given right of self-defense. We have brought up an open survey with incredible results. But I have to tell you is that no one can take our God-given right of self-determination, of our God-given right of self-defense to protect our liberty and our sacred honor. And we will not go quiet into the night. Meanwhile, our countrymen, women, and children are being silently exterminated by this proxy puppet of U.S. American foreign enemies.
Do you think, finally, that it would take military action, as potentially horrible that prospect could be, at the same time? Do you expect that is a possibility, or do you think that something could be worked out and Maduro will go quietly to a DACA in the Black Sea?
He cannot go quietly, but if I may add, there are other situations that maybe perhaps start by the Trump administration. For example, unsealing the indictments on the criminal officials and drug traffickers of Maduro's regime, and then perhaps go into apprehension and extraction mode to show them that this is not a joke, while they have to serve these penalties in the maybe inside the U.S. prisons, because there is no other way. If you see, we are in an extreme position. More than 500,000 Venezuelans have been killed by this weaponization of starvation. We have become also #1 violent country in the world, and we have no control over our sovereignty. And as you notice, it's very slowly a few hundred of the soldiers have been defecting, but that is not enough. We're talking about major superpowers that have taken under a criminal syndicate our sovereignty and are running our country to try to undermine U.S. authority in the region. So most probably the use of force will be necessary.
The use of force, well, that's at least starting what you just mentioned potentially. Unseal those indictments. We got El Chapo. We could possibly get some of the leaders who are propping up the Maduro regime and hopefully try and get an end to this. Isis Medina, thank you for speaking up. Thank you for fighting for freedom. Thank you for speaking and fighting on behalf of your people. Our hearts are with you and with them.
Thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate it.
Arthel?
Meanwhile, ISIS fighters in Syria setting off a series of bombs as the campaign to defeat the Islamic State appears to be nearing an end. We're live with the very latest. Plus, how NASA and SpaceX are working to launch a new era in U.S. space exploration.
A series of car bombs in Syria as Kurdish forces fight to liberate the last Syrian village held by the radical Islamic group there. Trey Inks is the latest on the fight and the victories against ISIS so far from Jerusalem. Hi, Trey.
Eric, the final major battle against ISIS is underway in the Syrian city of Baghouz. Democratic forces there say the group should be defeated within days. The Syrian Democratic Forces say the remaining ISIS territory is filled with landmines and tunnels, making it difficult to clear out the last group of fighters. According to reports on Friday, numerous civilians were evacuated from the area before ISIS engaged in an 18-hour battle with Democratic forces. Once the last strip of land is retaken, the international community faces a new battle, figuring out what to do with ISIS prisoners and their families. If fighters are ultimately released, like leaders such as President Trump have suggested, they could regroup. Analysts warn that extremists are gathering in the Syrian city of Idlib, and there is concern that ISIS could resurge in as little as 6 months. Meanwhile, throughout Syria, military action continues as the Assad regime engages in battles against opposition forces near Idlib, and countries such as Israel hit Iranian-backed targets in the south. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at his weekly cabinet meeting today to review the international meetings he has held regarding the fluid situation in Syria. With ISIS cells still active in Syria, additionally, you have government forces that are still trying to regain territory, and then you also have those Iranian-backed troops operating across the country. War in Syria is far from over, but the conflict is certainly changing and entering a new phase. Eric?
All right, Trey, thank you. Arthel?
A major milestone for space exploration, Eric. The SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule safely docked with the International Space Station early this morning. Robert Gray is live with the latest in Los Angeles. Hey, Robert.
Hey, Arthel, that's right. This test mission takes Americans a step closer to being back in the business of space flight with astronauts. The SpaceX Dragon capsule successfully docking with the International Space Station at 6 a.m. Eastern this morning. It delivered some 400 pounds of supplies to the space station crew. Also on board, a test dummy wearing sensors named Ripley. That's right, after the main character in the Alien movies. Dragon flew autonomously and was able to link up with the space station at high speed all by itself. The capsule also demonstrating its automated maneuvering abilities. It followed commands to first back away from the space station before docking without help from the robotic arm that typically guides spacecraft into position.
Capture confirmed. These amazing feats show us not how easy our mission is, but how capable we are of doing hard things. Welcome to the new era in spaceflight.
Arthel, if this goes as planned on Friday with the splashdown, 2 astronauts may go in a Dragon capsule as soon as July. Back to you.
Exciting. Robert Gray there in Los Angeles. Thank you. And we'll be right back.
Let's be honest.